Welcome to 21st Century Radio. I'm Dr. Zohara Hieronymus. Laura Kortner is our executive producer, and Anita Brockington, our engineer. Joining us this hour is Marylander Kate Kheel. Kate was my touch point when I became aware of how serious the issue of 5G, or fifth-generation rollout of telecommunications, was worldwide. Kate was kind enough to take time in my early introduction to walk me through the various aspects of the 5G rollout, its known or suspected impacts on human health, nature, and the larger planetary well-being. In short, how it affects our entire biosphere of Earth. Kate Kheel is a mother, a grandmother, a musician, and now advocate for safe internet and communications technology. While Kheel's formal training is in music, piano, and choral conducting, with 5G and the Internet of Things, which we've talked about before on two specials on 21st Century Radio, with this looming on the horizon, Kheel has dedicated herself to informing the public and policymakers about the harms of 5G and the Internet of Things, and calling for safe technology that respects and protects all life. Her commitment has resulted in 3 extremely valuable websites, or 4, which she either created or is intricately connected with, and I've mentioned them prior. One is www.marylandsmartmeterawareness.org, another whatis5g.info, www.safeg.net, and stop5ginternational.org, all of which we will reference throughout this hour. And I thank you again, Kate, for joining us and for taking so much time to educate me, particularly when I first started freaking out about the whole issue. So welcome to 21st Century Radio.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
So as I said in the introduction, and as you and I discussed, you got into this through the smart meters. So talk to us a bit about that, how this all began for you.
Oh, thank you. So I guess it must have been 2011, just coming out of being a musician and a mother, my sister, who was working on this issue in California, Marty Kheel, she said to me, you know, smart meters are coming to Maryland. And I said, so what am I supposed to do about it? And she says, well, you've got to do something. So I just pushed myself past my comfort zone and started talking to people, and eventually gathered a group of people together, and we called ourselves Maryland Smart Meter Awareness, and bit by bit was able to prevail upon the PSC to give us an opt-out in Maryland, albeit not the best opt-out, but we got one anyway.
Right. So as some Marylanders may know, and those who are listening and not in Maryland, what you're referring to is people can say, no, I don't want a smart meter, and you can opt out.
Correct. You will have to pay a fee, but you can opt out.
And what about once it's installed? Can you go back and opt out afterwards?
Yes, you can.
Fascinating, because they don't often tell you that when you ask. They go, oh, no, once the new stuff's been installed, we don't have the old equipment anymore, we can't do it, and that's not true?
Well, it gets a little complicated, and I'm not sure we want to spend that much time on it, but basically the opt-out we got does not allow you to choose what kind of meter you want. You have to accept what they give you, and they do not usually give you a fully analog meter.
Fascinating. All right, but you're right. Tonight's not the time. We've done some other hours on the issue of 5G, and I think it's always important to recognize there are new people coming into the audience at any show and any quarter hour who may not even know what 5G is and what we're really referring to. So why don't we back up to, just if you would describe for us what 5G refers to and why it differs from the other technology rollouts of 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G that we've seen worldwide.
Sure, I'd be happy to. It stands for fifth generation wireless technology, not to be confused with the 5G on cell phones, which is actually 5 gigahertz. Some people get confused about that. The fifth generation wireless technology is being pitched as a revolutionary kind of thing that's going to change our lives drastically, and unfortunately it will in ways that we may not want. But basically, they've opened up the higher millimeter wave frequencies, and those don't travel well through building materials and other obstacles, so they're going to need, quote-unquote, cell towers, cell antennas in front of every estimates differ, but one to two or 2 to 4 homes around the country.
Well, and just so I can explain to the audience, when you have a higher frequency, the sound wave or the radio frequency travels less far, so it can't penetrate, as Kate was saying, which is why you need more antennas in order to get enough amplitude, I guess, or enough density in the signal itself.
I'm not convinced that it travels less far, but it gets intercepted by obstacles far more easily. It doesn't go through obstacles because of the size of the wavelength.
Right. So in terms of their wanting to install new antennas, the antennas, and we're talking about a higher wavelength frequency, that it impacts biological systems, whether it's the human biosystem or trees or animals or bees or birds. I mean, what do we know so far about where 5G has been rolled out, the kinds of effects that people have seen, or from testing we already know?
So as far as the studies, there are enough studies. There are studies on the lower frequencies used in 2G, 3G, and 4G. There are studies well into the tens of thousands that show adverse bioeffects. As far as the millimeter wave frequencies, which are being opened up and added now, there are plenty of studies. I wouldn't say tens of thousands, but there are plenty of studies showing adverse health effects going back decades even. As far as the actual rollout, people are reporting problems, but I don't think it's been collected yet because it's too new. 5G is only actually the technology of 5G is only in certain cities, in certain pockets of certain cities around the country. So it's not pervasive. Again, it's not just 5G. It's 4G also is problematic. It's the proximity to our homes, the densification of the radiation, and the densification of this infrastructure, and the fact that we will no longer have any way of getting away from this stuff.
Well, and I think that's one of the more significant realities. And not only are they talking about increasing satellite density in order to accommodate, quicker bands, quicker download of data, far greater than we have today, and more of it. And so we're talking about an increase in everything that impacts not just our health, but also the very health of the planetary geology, or the ionosphere and the biosphere and the troposphere. And I was reading reports recently about how these technologies are even affecting the Schumann resonance, which is the basic background resonance, like about 7.6 hertz, and that it's being altered in ways different from when sun flares or other solar radiation impacted it. So when you look at this whole thing and you work on it, I know at one of your websites you do a beautiful job of talking about the downside. I think it's at whatis5g.info. You talk about the 9 downsides of 5G and the Internet of Things. So first describe for us what the Internet of Things is, and then maybe we can go through some of those 9 downsides, because you've done a beautiful job of making it simple to understand.
One thing I didn't say yet about 5G, the main reason they're putting all this infrastructure in is as a backbone technology to the Internet of Things. Now they're pitching it to the public to get them to get the buy-in from the public, as you're going to have faster download speeds on your, smartphone or whatever. But the real reason is to connect every single thing in the world to the Internet, every single moment in time, every single point in space, everywhere, pervasively connected to the Internet 24/7. And many people think it's a bad idea on many accounts. And so what you were referring to, I'll name them first and then just say 1 or 2 things about each of them.
All right, thank you.
Or you can pick and choose.
No,
one.
You go right through them.
Okay, so the first one is health. Well, in no particular order, health. And the next one is the impacts of this stuff on wildlife. our privacy, because as every single point, every single thing we do, everywhere we go, every single thing we say, and even to be what we think, our facial recognition technology, everything becomes a data point, which is the new oil, essentially. It's monetized.
And I think one of the important things you explained to me, as have some of our prior guests, is that this is not being demanded by the public. This is purely corporatization and technology itself pushing itself forward for growth and profit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We were not consulted. And the biggest question before us, is this the kind of future that we want for ourselves, for our children, and for future generations? And if not, we need to carve out a different future, and our voices need to be heard. Let me just continue, if that's
please.
okay, with the downsides. The effects on our brains and humanity and our children, how this stuff is affecting us, with children becoming addicted and suicide and loneliness and depression reaching epidemic proportions. So how is this affecting our kids, our relationships, our families? Then there's energy consumption, which is the amount of energy it takes to keep all these humming and buzzing things going in the Internet of Things and smart cities and smart regions is astronomical. And so it's questionable whether it will ever be able to pay for its own energy footprint.
Yeah, I think I read one thing that the lurking threat behind the promise of 5G delivering up to 1,000 times as much data as today's networks is, quote, that 5G could also consume up to 1,000 times as much energy.
Absolutely. Astronomical amount of energy. And, of course, we know that most energy is produced by burning fossil fuel. So it's hardly a green technology.
No, and I think that's really significant to point out. I mean, given that presumably this is supposed to be the new paradigm of sustainability, behind every one of these quote-unquote bites, there's mining, there's metal processing, there's oil extraction, there's petrochemicals. And I got that from the Environmental Health Trust website when we interviewed them in our recent show, to just look at how significant a change this is. I mean, it's really a paradigm shift in how the future is being laid out for us, including, I have to add, those who drive for artificial intelligence, virtual reality, human machine. And I come back to the comment you made and that I suggested as well. This isn't something that has been voted on in any state. I mean, none of us said, oh, this is the brave new world we want.
Absolutely not. And as a matter of fact, people increasingly are waking up and saying, whoa, as soon as they realize what is happening and what's being imposed on us, more and more people around the world are waking up and saying, no, we did not consent to this. We do not want this, which, of course, brings us to the international global protest that's happening in January, where countries around the world are coming together to say, no, we did not consent to this. We do not want it. And what we do want is safe, proven, wired technology that's safe for us, safe for the planet, and far more respectful of privacy and cybersecurity and energy consumption. So, yeah, people are coming around the world are coming together. I think that the events, the Stop 5G International website talks about it, but the events start on January 12th. There'll be 2 weeks of actions to stop 5G, and on the website there are suggested actions that people can take and resources to take those actions. And then on January 25th, there's somewhere like 40, 45 different protests currently being organized in different countries, from Kenya to Sweden to Switzerland, everywhere. Being organized for people to say no, we don't want it, and that's the first of many protests that are going to come until our voices are heard.
I think, I finally calmed down after 2 months of being in virtual hysterics over this, truthfully, because when I really sort of computed in my heart and person the scale of the change we're talking about for the planetary population and for the civilization overall. I mean, when I realized there'd be 500 billion devices connected to the internet by 2030, 500 billion. And they're talking about 70.2 million small cell towers to be installed by 2025. That's around the corner. So anyway, there's a lot to do, but I realize this is a generational issue, and it actually calmed me down, I have to say, when I realized it's not going to change tonight, but our effort tonight at least will help those in our audience get better informed and take part in their own communities. If you're just joining us, Kate Kheel is with us. She first introduced me to the broad spectrum of 5G and what it means, and that's what we're talking about this evening. You can go to several websites, www.whatis5g.info, whatis5g.info. You can also, and we'll talk more fully about it, safeg.net, that there is an alternative. No one's saying everyone has to become a neo-Luddite. We're saying we can move forward, but we have to move forward with respect for life and the environment and privacy and the well-being of our planet. You can also go to stop5ginternational.org, and one more I want to add is the Environmental Health Trust, ehtrust.org, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to 21st Century Radio with Dr. Zohara Hieronymus. I'm Theodora Scarrato, Executive Director of Environmental Health Trust, a scientific think tank focused on the health and environmental impacts of 5G and wireless. You can learn more about us at www.ehtrust.org. That's ehtrust.org.
There we are, and continuing our ongoing coverage of the 5G issue, because you really don't hear anything in the news media other than the pro-5G by the telecommunications industry. And there's very little media coverage of the actual known impact that we already understand from telecommunications, whether it's, trees that are harmed by standard radiation emissions from antenna equipment, or wireless frequencies we know interfere with birds' navigation systems and circadian rhythms. And it also might have a lot to do with why our pollinators are decreasing, having looked at the change in their behavior, physiology, and morphology. If you're just joining us, a 2-hour special again on 5G this evening. In our first hour, we are joined currently by Kate Kheel, who has been instrumental in helping educate the public worldwide with various websites and efforts. Whatis5g.info, stop5ginternational.org, safeg.net, and I wanted to mention again environmentalhealthtrust.org. They have some wonderful little handouts that you can print out and share with your neighbors or your school systems. So, Kate, coming back to the 9 downsides of 5G, I don't know where we left off.
So absolutely. We left off after energy, so I will just quickly go from there.
All right.
E-waste. The Internet of Things. With the Internet of Things, all of the items such as mattresses, tea kettles, plant waterers, all of those become digital devices as they're connected to the Internet. So the amount of e-waste, electrical waste, will increase enormously, and the question is whether our Earth can digest that much e-waste, and furthermore, the actual e-waste from this stuff is not even the most, is actually in the manufacturing. It's not in the after use. The most of the e-waste is in the manufacturing and the mining for this stuff. As a matter of fact, I think the estimate that Josh Leposky gives is 85% is in the manufacturing of the hazardous waste, and the energy consumption is in the manufacturing of this. Then going on to conflict minerals. this is a very painful topic, actually, and unfortunately not well known by many people. In order to use all these digital things and electronics and devices and so forth, rare earth minerals are needed that are many of which are gotten in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And to date, somewhere between 5 million and 6 million people have died in a war that's essentially fueled by our appetite for these minerals. It also involves child labor. It also involves a lot of women being raped and stolen. There's a lot of political instability there that is fueled by our involvement in looking for these minerals. And then there's cybersecurity, which is, in 2018, was ranked by the World Global Research Report as the third greatest global risk, topped only by natural disasters and extreme weather events. And, of course, when you have everything interconnected and connected to the Internet, you have millions of new portals of entry and to work your way into the Internet, and also as everything becomes connected to the Internet, it's no longer just your your data, your bank statement, your credit card number that's impacted or potentially stolen, but everything is the physical world. These are cyber physical systems. So essentially, as Bruce Schneier says, give the Internet hands and feet, and it will have the ability to punch and kick. So, yeah, these cyber attacks have major physical implications on the world. Then there's resiliency. These wireless networks do not withstand severe weather events. Wired technologies such as fiber or copper or coaxial cable are far more resilient than cell towers.
And that's what I think is important to stress for a moment, is that everyone who has an awareness about the damage that this kind of technology is already doing to the Earth and all life systems are also aware that there are alternatives that we already have and can be expanded without the same kind of impact, danger, and damage. And maybe we should take a little bit of time, because your work in SafeG.net, which is the online expression of it, is the alternative. And I think it's important to not lose too much of the night before we have a chance to talk about that. So share some more about what a SafeG would look like and how we can move forward by, having, more data and faster bandwidth downloads and whatever it is everybody seems to think we need so much of, but how to do it safer.
Right. So I worked with the team in Washington, Jim Turner and Kurt Cobb, and we sat there for, hours and hours and hours, and we said, what do we want? We're up against $1 trillion, more than multi-trillion-dollar industry. How can we confront them? And we said, well, the only thing that we can do the most effective is kind of a rebranding campaign. What do we want? We want a future that weaves technology safely into our world, not so it consumes us or it impacts our health, but just a safe integration of technology into our lives. So we came up with the branding SafeG, and we want to invite the public to say, do you want 5G or SafeG? And SafeG is, primarily just more philosophically, it is technology that prioritizes health, environment, privacy, sanity, and these things over corporate profit, over, essentially greed or whatever.
And it's not to say that going that route is in any way going to usurp the profit-making capacity. It's just going to make it so that it's not as, I compared this, and somebody said to me, why? I compared it to the development of nuclear weapons, and that's how large it feels to me. Because once instituted, once available, it has such consequences for the entire planet for so many generations.
Right.
And so when we talk about safe G and understanding that there are wired technologies and there are ways to deliver the capacities that the technological, direction of civilization may or may not need to go, but at least we can do it without destroying our health, without destroying our ionosphere, without destroying
Right.
all biosystems, and also this issue of liberty. I mean, I'm a big, cheerleader for liberty, have been my entire lifetime, and when you consider the degree to which already our lives are not private by anything that you use with a credit card or online or shopping online or having a Facebook or having an email account, that these are all now records that don't disappear even if you delete them.
Absolutely. But going back to Safe G, more specifically, we define it as wired to every home and business with the idea of reducing exposure to wireless radiation over time. Because if our internet and telecommunications infrastructure were primarily wired, this would allow us to reduce our exposure and dependence on cell towers and wireless antennas and satellites. And it furthermore would be far more energy efficient, far more reliable than wireless, which is obviously impacted by weather, by other eventualities. And wired is also more easily defended from cyber attacks, and above all, wired is significantly less hazardous to our health and to the health of other life forms with whom we share this earth.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading when you go a step further to the increase in satellites that they're talking about. And I mean, right now there's a total of, I was looking it up for my own edification, 8,378 objects have been launched into space, 4,994 still in orbit. And they're talking about adding hundreds of thousands virtually at about 22,000 miles up above us. And there's all these different kinds of satellites and applications, but our cell phones are dependent on these satellites. And the more wireless technology, the more satellites they'll need. I mean, right now we have 4,987 satellites whizzing above our heads every single day.
So I did want to go back to that, to the satellites,
yes,
for a few reasons. One, I wanted to discuss that, but I also wanted to share that part of the protest, a main part of the protest in January, is to deliver the Stop 5G on Earth and in Space appeal to governments around the world.
Do you have a copy of the statement?
So the appeal is actually about 10 pages.
Right, I've read that, but isn't there a short paragraph that describes what it is that the appeal is for?
No, but I'm not aware of one. I won't say no, I'm not aware of one. But if you go to, I can get the exact website, or you can just Google 5G space appeal, and you can get to the appeal. But what I did want to say is currently there are applications in for about 50,000 satellites in space, and their goal is to merge those with the land-based 5G, so that, for example, we're worried about antennas being put in front of our homes around the country, 4G, 5G antennas right next to our homes, literally 6 to 10 feet away from a baby's bedroom or whatever. But what the satellites are trying to do is work together with the land-based ones. So, for example, two companies want to start with one company 1 million and the other company 2 million user interface devices. So the satellites will be beaming down radiation to people's devices that they put on their cars or on their homes or both. So essentially, and those devices are antennas, 5G antennas. So cars will be driving around town with these 5G antennas, and people's cell phones will be connecting to them, and then from there it will go up via satellite into the ionosphere, whatever, up into space. So the working together of the system in space and on Earth is going to drastically increase the impacts of both. That's just one of the problems. Another huge problem is that right now people's devices talk wirelessly to the cell tower. You know, their cell phone talks to the cell tower, but from the cell tower back to the server is mostly fiber. It's mostly wired fiber. And they're planning to have the cell tower back to the server go up through space up through these satellites rather than wired through the ground. So that will allow them to put these cell antennas everywhere, even in the country, the most remote areas, which now they are not able to do because it's too costly. It's not cost-effective for them to lay that much fiber. So if people are out in the country, they're saved pretty much for a period of time. But if the backhaul, what's called the backhaul, goes up through these satellites, then we're doomed. In the country, in the remotest areas, we're all going to be stuck with this stuff.
Right, and again, we haven't focused explicitly, as we have on other shows, about the environmental and health impacts and the impacts we already know to the biosystems of birds and bees and trees. And I mentioned the Schumann resonance, the very frequency of the Earth itself. We're not talking about something minor. This is not just new cell phones. This is an entire paradigm shift of the way we view ourselves, our role in the world, and the role of technology in our lives now and in the future. And that's why I said this is a generational issue, and it will continue to go on. But from January 12th through January 25th or so, there are efforts around the world for public education and protests, and you can learn more about those by going to www.stop5ginternational.org. That's www.stop5ginternational.org.
This is Dr. Tom Vallone from IntegrityResearchInstitute.org, and you're listening to 21st Century Radio with Dr. Zohara Hieronymus.
Welcome back to 21st Century Radio. Kate Kheel is with us, and Kate is an international activist on the issue of 5G, as well as being a Maryland resident and a person who has helped do a great deal of education about how to have safe G in our state and nation and world. So, Kate, I want to come back to stop5ginternational.org, because I know that they have a declaration, and I don't have it in front of me, and I'm hoping you do, and maybe you can read it for us.
Yes, very much. I would like to. Thank you. Just a moment. Just lost it.
All right. Well, while you're looking for
it, found it.
All right. For those who are just joining us, this is a 2-hour special again on this issue of the 5th generation rollout of technology, and it's not just about our cell phones; it's about the Internet of Things, where they want to have everything, billions of things connected to a data stream that is collectible and purchasable or sellable or knowable, and you can imagine where that will lead to. All right, so the declaration, I think it's important for people to hear what the intention is.
Right, because I think it's important for people to understand we're not just asking to stop 5G. we're saying we didn't consent to this. This is not the future that we wanted and envisioned for our children and grandchildren and generations to come. And we need to reclaim our future from profit-driven corporations so we can sort of envision a different way forward. We envision and seek to ensure a world where 5G, 6G, or any other G is replaced by safe technology that has undergone scrutiny to ensure the health and well-being of all life on the planet before being unleashed. We envision and seek to ensure a world where the health and well-being of all life takes precedence over corporate self-gain. We envision and seek to ensure a world where people are connected face-to-face and heart-to-heart and not consumed by ubiquitous virtual connectivity. We envision and seek to ensure a world where the increasingly frenetic pace of hyperconnectivity is slowed down so we can once again connect to our own humanity. We envision and seek to ensure a world where the pursuit of faster, bigger, and more is replaced by contentment with just enough. In short, a future that respects and protects all life on this planet. We call on all world governments to heed the growing voice of scientists, medical doctors, engineers, and others who warn we must halt the race to 5G and consciously chart a wiser and safer course into the future.
That's beautifully written.
Thank you. So that's where we're coming from, and I think most of the people protesting around the world and trying to get the space appeal into the hands of legislators and governments around the world and the UN and the World Health Organization and so forth, I think are pretty much on the same page with those.
So, people always ask me, well, what can I do? So share with us some of the perspectives you have about what we can do and also what we cannot do, but what's effective and how to go forward, because I know there are people in our audience who are concerned. There are already antennas going up in Baltimore City, and we will be talking about some efforts in Tacoma Park, Montgomery County here in Maryland, that are trying to change this and do the same thing that you said of, we can have wired technology, which is safe and reliable, and we're not as great exposure for lack of privacy and all of the other interferences we know to the environment and to biohealth. So what can we do?
So on the personal level, we can reduce our exposure in our in our own home environment as much as possible, and that involves using Ethernet cords rather than Wi-Fi in your home. So if you want to connect to the Internet with your laptop, do it with an Ethernet cord. It also involves, if possible, having wired to your home, be it fiber or coaxial cable. It involves reducing, keeping your cell phone, if you have a cell phone, off or on airplane mode as much as possible. I personally don't have a cell phone and have no desire to have one. But if you do have one, keep it away from you. Keep it on airplane mode as much as possible where it's not going to be radiating you. And so you can take personal measures like those to reduce your exposure in your home. Unfortunately, we cannot reduce the towers going up outside our homes and in our communities and the satellites raining down radiation upon us. So on the level of that, the question is, what can we do to raise public awareness and to inform our legislators what we think about it? And so some of those things are sign the space appeal and help deliver the space appeal to governments. And in the Washington protest, if you go on the website, on the Stop 5G International. There's a protest event being organized in Washington, D.C., and there's one in New York also, and other places around the country. You can inform, on the website, again, Stop 5G International, there's a letter you can send to your medical practitioners to inform them, because they are also not so aware of the health impacts and the science and so forth. You can pass out flyers. We have resources on the website. People are hanging up signs on poles around their communities saying, future home of a microwave transmitting antenna.
Right.
You can write letters to your legislators. That is so important, because when we talk to legislators, they say, well, gosh, I haven't heard from many constituents about this issue. So in order for us to let them know that this is important to us, that's our only sort of way into influencing people, is through their constituents, because we don't have the money the telecom has.
And certainly we've seen resistance around the country and in the world in school systems, where schools have gotten rid of their wireless technology, and they've wired the schools for exactly this reason. I know, and in France now, if you're under the age of 15, you can't take a cell phone to school. I mean, there are other countries that are far more aware, and the citizenry far more educated than in the United States, about the dangers of wireless technology, the radiation from satellites and cell towers and the cell phones themselves, the incidence of cancer, etc. They are now making, things you can put your phones in, and blankets you can put on your lap to protect yourself. Defender Shield is one of the organizations, one of the companies I know of. It's called defendershield.org, who makes these kinds of things. There's actually a company here in Baltimore that makes Wi-Fi beanie caps, so you can wear a cap on your head and protect your brain from all the radiation, and you don't have to walk around with tin foil on your head or a Faraday cage. Right. They're actually making caps. I mean, it's so serious now that they're going to start making clothing to protect people, so that just the ambient environment in your offices, but in your cars, the new modern cars are now worse than our offices in our homes, with satellite music and all of the technologies that everybody wants, and the map directions, etc., and the nav systems. Those are all also what we're talking about, and it's exposing people to an inordinate amount of radiation.
Right. There's a lot of it in cars, especially with the new, sensors. Driverless cars are going to be astronomically emitting, but currently they don't connect to the cell towers. They're doing it via sensors all over their cars. And yes, anybody who drives next to or walks next to one of those cars is going to be beamed with radiation.
And of course the people driving them and the passengers in it, the babies, the children, the grandchildren, whatever. Look, we are almost out of time. We have about 2 minutes left, and I want to leave that to you to give some closing remarks and anything else we've not touched on.
I guess what I'm thinking is that at best it feels like we're allowing toddlers to play with the planet, kind of like children in a sandbox, and if people, and at worst, maybe people are disregarding the health and well-being of all life for personal gain, and if we don't take a stand now, the world will leave to our children and all future generations, if we even leave a world at all, maybe a far cry from the beauty and bounty that we have been blessed with. And I guess Hillel says, if not now, when? And if not you, who? It's all of our responsibilities to step up to the plate, to take a stand, and to say, to reclaim our future.
Yeah, and obviously,
for all life.
Well, and I think the beauty of the websites you've created and the opportunities, and as we'll discuss in the next hour of our program, efforts here in Maryland to stop it, at least in Tacoma Park. And that's what's happening is local communities of people are making a difference in their community by taking action. So follow up with www.whatis5g.info, www.stop5ginternational.org, www.safeg.net, and www.ehtrust.org. And all of these websites have wonderful information and literature, handouts for you to send to legislators, to your mayors, to your local representatives in the state and county levels, and to the schools and your church groups and your neighborhood associations. I mean, this is the kind of work that recycling once started from, which was a few households working together to make a difference. Thank you, Kate Kheel, so much for all the work you're doing on behalf of the world and all of us here in Maryland.
Give me life.